This is the PR Podcast, a show about how public relations helps you tell your story to the world. We talk with great PR practitioners who have the skills, creativity, and just plain savvy to get their clients noticed. Now here's your host, Jody Fisher.
Hey everyone, and welcome to the PR Podcast. I'm Jody Fisher. Thanks for joining us. Well, want to give some shameless plugs at the top of this episode. Three, in fact. Number one is the PR Lunch Hour on Twitter Spaces. It's hosted by Tanya McKenzie, Tamara Sykes, and Michelle Garrett. It's every Friday at noon Eastern Time on Twitter Spaces. This is 1 hour of lively conversation with PR people talking about the wins, the fails, the fun PR stories of the week. Tanya, Tamara, and Michelle are fantastic. And I try to get in on that conversation every Friday whenever I can. It is definitely worth the hour. You know, grab your lunch and sit down and get in there on Twitter Spaces and listen to the PR Lunch Hour. Shameless plug number two is for our friend Molly McPherson, the Indestructible PR Podcast. It's her show about crisis PR that dissects the PR fail of the week and talks about how to deliver an indestructible reputation. Molly is the best crisis practitioner that I know. And so time well spent listening to her podcast and listening to her knowledge. And shameless plug number three for this week is the My Simplified Life podcast with Michelle Glogovac. She's a PR pro and a mom who talks life lessons, stories, and experiences that are filled with humor and inspiring takeaways. Michelle is a terrifically positive person, and you'll enjoy listening to her podcast. So check those three out if you have the time. Add them to your PR, to your podcast listening list. And if you want to get plugged here on the top of the PR Podcast, send us a DM to or at the PR Podcast on Twitter. We'll mention you in an upcoming episode. Now on to our guest. Let's get right to it. Brad Marley is owner of Yelram Media and a marketing PR pro dedicated to storytelling that helps companies thrive. From content creation to media relations to all types of PR programs and campaigns, he does it all. His weekly email newsletter is a who's who and what's what of the PR industry and required reading for anyone who's working in our space. Brad, welcome to the PR Podcast.
Oh, Jody, thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Where does the name Yelram Media come from?
It's my last name backwards. When I started this company about 3 or 4 years ago, my wife and I were driving, I think, to Virginia on vacation, and I had just been let go from an agency, and I said to her, I think I'm going to try this on my own, and I gave the name about 10 seconds worth of thought, and I just went with it. I didn't want to spend too much time coming up with a name. And here we are.
There's your conversation starter, right? So let's trace your path through PR. Did you start in PR or did you start somewhere else?
Yeah, I started in PR. I went to the University of Detroit. I wanted to be on the radio. And I eventually, my dream was to have a morning show. And Drew and Mike was a popular show here in Detroit, and I loved listening to them. And so I went to school for that. And then I quickly realized there was 2 radio classes that the college was offering. And my mom's friend was the PR manager for a cell phone company that eventually they became Verizon. But I think, there was a couple of other iterations, and it was a small company. And I did an internship one winter before my senior year of college, maybe it was my junior year. And I really enjoyed it. I got to go to the Detroit Auto Show. They had a sponsorship and did some behind the scenes stuff. And I realized that radio is probably not going to be a lucrative career choice. Not saying PR is, but it's more so. And from there, I worked for Ford Motor Company out of college in their media center, which really involved taking phone calls from members of the media and sending them to the right person. And then I worked at some agencies in and around Metro Detroit, worked with a lot of large clients like General Motors and Microsoft. And like I said, I got about 3 or 4 years ago, I was kind of bouncing around from agency to agency. And I said, now's the time to try going out on my own, because I thought that I was able to do the work, I didn't necessarily need an agency backing me. And I had some thoughts on how work should be done. And I said, I might as well do it now or I'm never going to do it.
That's a great story. Yeah, I had I have a similar background that I started in radio myself.
Okay.
And I agree with you that reporting, especially radio reporting, not the most lucrative thing in the world. Not that they're not paid, but
Right.
not the most lucrative thing, and grueling. I mean, the media business, whether you're a print reporter, a radio reporter, TV reporter, is grueling, right? The people who are in the trenches, who are out in the field, there are several highly paid people who sit in well-heated and well-air-conditioned studios, and the rest of them are out there grinding,
Yeah.
whether they're in the newsroom or whether they're on the street. Was there a moment where you looked at PR and said, "Ooh, this is for me"?
I don't think there was a moment. I think as the industry started to change and I started to realize I could do things within PR that I love doing, like writing blog content, recording podcasts. I mean, there's a direct correlation there to what I wanted to do growing up and what I could do for a living, and was able to introduce some of these programs to clients, and I got to do it. Like I built out a podcast um, program for Microsoft. This is a long time ago, but they had customers and they wanted to tell their customers stories, and we pitched them on doing podcasts. And this was at the very beginning of kind of this revolution of podcasts, and now it's commonplace. But back then it was still kind of the Wild West. And so we had a studio that we built at our agency, and it had the foam on the walls and it was quiet, and we got to talk to really interesting people. At one point, and maybe this is when it really set in, I was working with Microsoft, and they had this software that their customers were using, and one of the customers was the New Orleans Hornets. And we were able to connect with their head of, I think it was their head of IT, and we flew down to New Orleans and we created these podcasts, but we also created these videos where we got to talk to the head coach and about how they were using Microsoft software to be a better basketball team. And I think just sitting there and thinking, wow, this is, first of all, this is really cool. Like, I don't have to fake it. And I'm a big sports fan. And just to realize there were these really interesting stories that we could tell that you wouldn't think of. Like when you think of an NBA team, maybe now you think of analytics and data, but 10, 12 years ago, you weren't. And so we were able to tell the story from a Microsoft point of view, but highlight these customers. And when you get a customer like a professional basketball team, it's easier to draw attention to it. And I think maybe that was when I said, I could like create this little media program and do this for other clients. And it was really fun. And I think that's probably when I realized that I had made the right decision.
Talking about that podcast that you developed for Microsoft, what was the goal when you set out to create that podcast? Because I think some people, when they think of a podcast, they think of like the Big 10, right? That you see at the top of your podcast platform, right? And we need 1 million subscribers. Mm-hmm. What was your framework going into that podcast?
We did not set out to set the world on fire. We were looking for an alternative way, and we would attach press releases to it, and we would pitch media to cover it. So there was that aspect of it. In that sense, it was a traditional media relations program, but doing the podcast was an opportunity for the agency I worked for to kind of set ourselves apart from what other agencies were doing and show that we had really smart people who understood the landscape of where PR was headed. And also for us to use it for our new business decks and showcase, here is a traditional client like Microsoft, and we were able to convince them to take a chance on these podcasts. And we took it a step. So the success was just, if I'm being honest, was running this podcast on a regular basis and producing them and giving them these pre-made podcasts that they could then use for their purposes.
You're literally using it for new business development.
Yeah, that was part of it.
Yeah.
we ended up taking it a step further, and we found two guys at Microsoft and we branded them as Point and Click and used them as like the IT investigators. It was a short-lived program, but you can probably still find those clips on YouTube of them. They came to New Orleans with us and they sat down with the spokespeople for the Hornets and talked, and it was amazing. It was like, it was one of those things where you're just like, I can't believe we're being allowed to do this. We had
Right.
we had Twitter accounts set up, we had Facebook accounts set up. I still get messages on the IT investigators Facebook page from people who want me to investigate other people.
Oh,
And
that's wild.
I don't reply, but it was crazy. Like it was, I don't know if you could do that today, or maybe you could and you would get a lot more money put behind it, but it was so much fun. And that's, when you get into whatever industry you're working in, if you can have fun, I think that's part of the goal.
Yeah, there are hundreds, if not thousands, of podcasts out there, and this one being one of them. And so I've always looked at a podcast as a piece of owned content, right? Where you can take it and use it for other purposes that the main purpose is not, as you said, getting 1 million followers or getting 1 million clicks or whatever it is. It's really to create content and develop your thought leadership, develop your expertise, and demonstrate your expertise in a different kind of a way.
Exactly.
Tell us a little bit about some of the clients that you work for. You don't have to name drop, but maybe some of the verticals you're in, and sort of what are some of the challenges that they're facing now when it comes to getting their message out?
Well, a lot of the companies I work with have not been getting their message out until they started working with us. And I have a partner, her name's Amy Bryson. It's the two of us. And so that's one of the challenges we face is we have to get that campaign off the ground while assuring them that what we're doing is going to work, but it's not going to look like it's working right away. We might get, and we preface this with a lot of our clients, if we're just starting out, we tell them this is going to take a while. Like if you're a company that no one has heard of, it might take up to a year before we start to gain some traction in that space. And that involves consistent storytelling, press releases, pitching media. If it's blog content, it's consistent blog creation and sharing it, and really just helping their audience to begin to see who they are. And for the clients that and I tell a lot of my clients, if your business is, if you're in a space that's quote unquote hot right now, no matter what that is, I think your chances of success, like if you're talking about thought leadership, I think the chances of success are greater when you're talking to media who have never heard of you, but you offer a different viewpoint. They're always looking for new experts to highlight. But it does take time, and you're not just gonna create a viral blog post and in a month and have a ton of people who are coming to you. So
yeah, I chuckle at the people who sit across the table from me and they say, we need this to go viral. I'm like, when you figure out how that works, you let me know.
Yeah.
And it's great to hear another PR pro talking about, the need for consistency, the need for playing the long game, because I've coined a phrase that, PR is not a water spigot. You can't turn it on and off. You got to turn it on and let it flow and let it continue to flow. And that's where people get used to hearing from you.
Yeah. And the best clients are the ones who understand that.
Yeah. Yeah. Do you find that the folks you work with, how hard is it to get them to understand the importance of that regular communication? And how do you help them find a voice if they don't have one?
Yeah, well, it's difficult because regular communication costs money, and just like any small business, I want to make money. And so how do I balance going to them and saying, you need a 6-month program, whatever that's going to entail, blog content, case studies, media relations, and say it's going to cost X amount of dollars, while also not looking like somebody who's just trying to cash in on them. And that's the challenge. It's, you know, but also when you've done it before, you can show them like, this is how we envision your program going, and these are the people that we want to talk to. And the voice comes from just talking to our clients on a regular basis, and being in those weekly meetings and talking to the subject matter experts, and kind of keeping an ear open for those talking points that continue to pop up when in every conversation, and taking those and turning them into stories and content, and just regular content that we can write on their behalf.
Do you work with the clients, or how do you work with the clients to identify those subject matter experts or those key people you want to talk to? I mean, typically, it could be the CEO or some C-suite executive who is the spokesperson, the face of, but my experience is that there are far better and more specific subject matter experts further down the hierarchy that can be just as powerful as the CEO somewhere.
Yeah, I think it's just trial and not trial and error, but as you know, you usually have one contact person at the client, and as you talk to them and more information comes out, you start to understand who you need to be talking to. Just the other day, we had re-upped with a client, and he invited one of his colleagues to our weekly call for the first time, and within 5 minutes I was like, why haven't you been on these calls up until now? And so now we have this other person who's going to be giving us content that we can mold and create and help tell the story of the company. But I wouldn't have known about this guy unless my client told me. And so I think, yeah, you kind of navigate toward that CEO right away, but there are so many other people who are more in the everyday work of the business, and they probably don't know what they know. And so it's just continuing to have conversations and asking the right questions. And if your client mentions something kind of off the cuff, taking that a step further and saying, well, hold on, let's learn more about that, because maybe we need to talk to so-and-so because they have information that we need and you just haven't thought of it. I mean, that's what my service is. It's like we're trained in asking the right questions and talking to the right people and pulling stuff out. I mean, the best PR campaigns I've ever done were based on something that was mentioned in passing that we explored, and it turned out being something really awesome.
That also implies a level of trust with the client, right? I mean, that client would not have invited their colleague to the call if they didn't have a level of trust and confidence in you, right? And so are there ways that you work to help inspire that trust, that confidence?
I think it's just producing work that they like, right? I mean, if you can get some media hits for them, or turn because just the clients we work with, they necessarily don't have the time to do the storytelling, or B, they just don't like doing it, but they understand the value in it. So if we can show them that we can take their ideas and their thoughts and turn them into like real tangible pieces of content that we can put out there in front of the right audience, that's where the trust comes from. And I think, again, getting actual media hits for them and showing them that their name is in print, that also goes a long way in proving that we can do the work. We know we can do the work, but I also understand, being in their shoes, if you've never worked with an agency like mine, it can be a bit of a risk to give me actual American dollars to get your company name in fleet owner, or and so you got to do it. You got to put your money where your mouth is, because and that's one of the things that kind of drew me to PR as well, is your value sometimes is based on how many pieces of coverage can you drive, like actual pieces of coverage, not like a press release getting picked up 500 times over the wire. That doesn't count. We all know that. But 5 pieces of unique coverage, I can say, look, I did this it's like a scorecard, right? It's like, here's how many pieces of coverage I drove. This is actual proof that we can do it.
Yeah, that I have a habit of actually populating my weekly or biweekly client agendas with just that information. Right at
Yeah.
the top of the list is, here's the hits we've put up in the last, since the last time we talked.
Mhm.
Here's the number, here's how many interviews we've done, here's the pieces that we're expecting to come out. And it's sort of this rolling accomplishment list that reminds the client we're doing things, in addition to then providing that regular, whatever it is, monthly, quarterly, whatever it is, report.
Yeah.
You're just continually feeding them, saying, we're working for you all the time. And just because we go a week or two and there's maybe not an article or something that comes out about you, doesn't mean that we don't have 4 things going on in the background, or 40 for
Yeah.
that matter. And
Maybe
typically
all-
we're closer to 40 than 4, right?
yeah. You just have to continue the momentum. That's what you should always be doing. Like you said, even if nothing has popped, at least show that you're moving things forward.
So let's pivot over to the newsletter. So much of what we do is, and what we do here on this show is sharing tips, tools, best practices, ideas that we have as PR professionals and as storytellers. Where does the idea for the newsletter come from?
Well, the newsletter kind of evolved. I started it when I was at the last agency I worked for. And so if we're coming up, I don't know, I think we're like 10 issues away from 200. So what's that, like 3 years worth? No, 4 years worth of
Mm-hmm.
maybe. So I
Yeah.
was at my last agency when I started, and I didn't really know what I wanted it to be. Like I said, I was working for someone, so I just started it. And I think at the beginning it was some original thoughts from me, and then maybe I was linking to like a podcast or something, that or a book that I thought people should read. And then I kind of zoned in. Like I had a blog a long time ago, and I would ask people questions, the 5 and 1, like 5 questions related to your work, and 1 question, what book are you reading? Because I'm an avid reader. I always like to hear what other people are reading. And I just kind of, one day or 1 week when I was writing the newsletter, I think it was Eric Hansen who was the first person to answer questions. And I was like, it would be easier for me if there's a regular format, because it was still kind of, there wasn't anything set in stone. And I just decided this is what I'm going to do. So now it's an upfront section where I kind of talk about storytelling and how I think companies can better tell their stories. And then I interview somebody. And quite honestly, if I interview somebody, I think most people who open my newsletter are more interested in reading what those people have to say than what I have to say. But I can also promote it, and I can tag them when I promote it, and they're going to share it with their audience. And I'm going to get a lot of people reading the newsletter. And I'm not doing it for the hits and the clicks, because my subscriber base is nothing to write home about, but I do enjoy hearing what other people have to say. And I think getting that other viewpoint is great. And so that's where it is now. And I don't plan on it changing anytime soon. And now that it's just like anything, once it's set and you know what it's going to look like, it becomes a little easier to do. And I can crank it out every week, and it's not taking up a full day of my work.
Yeah, you've been kind enough to have me featured in your newsletter, and I did just that. I shared it out with my network, and I got a lot of nice compliments coming back, and that's another great thing about our profession, and I guess really about any profession, is as you share and you build bridges online, those online relationships become real world relationships. And I mentioned, for example, the Twitter Spaces chat up front. Many of the people who are on that Twitter Spaces chat every week have been on the show. And I've actually met them in person, live and in person. But the whole idea being is that to build those bridges, to build those relationships that can then benefit us over time. And I've actually I'm actually working with a couple of the people who I've met through Twitter Spaces and met online, and they complement what I do. We were just on a new business call earlier today where we were pitching business. And this is, I'm side by side with someone else who does something that's very specialized, and I bring my skills to the table, and we kind of meet, and it becomes a very successful endeavor, all off of social media and something like, this show or your newsletter. So that's really great.
Yeah, social media is usually a great thing. I think there's
Usually, right?
there's a lot of toxicity, but that's one of the things that I'm striving for in as we've gotten into 2022 is to not to go down the rabbit hole of things that make me angry or things that are just going to piss me off. It's like I'm going to use it for good, and I'm going to because that's just I don't know. It's too easy to get lost.
Yeah, no doom scrolling. No doom
No, no,
scrolling.
no. Take Twitter off your phone. Delete Facebook. That's
Right.
my PSA for social media.
There you go. There you go. So since we're at the front end of 2022, do you have a sort of any kind of predictions of where PR goes, where storytelling goes, where media goes this year?
Yeah, I think, and Frank Strong had asked me this, and they put it in writing. I think we're going to see more journalists going to their own channels, like a Substack newsletter or just newsletters, and trying to, I think it's called like entrepreneurial journalism, like trying to build these communities where they're not beholden to a newspaper or a media outlet. It's just them, and they are doing whatever they want to do in their newsletter. And maybe you have to pay to read it, maybe you don't. I think we're going to see that happening a lot more. And it becomes a challenge for PR pros because eventually we're going to want to get into those newsletters depending on the topic. I mean, if your target tech reporter leaves the Wall Street Journal and just starts his or her own newsletter, you're going to read it, and B, you're going to start thinking, how do we get covered in this newsletter? Because I think you have more of a captive audience too. If you can, these people want to read. It's not like where you say, well, we got into the Wall Street Journal and they have 300,000 subscribers. So, hey, 300,000 people saw what you were saying. Now it's like maybe there's 50,000 subscribers, but those 50,000 people, when they see that newsletter come through, they're excited to open it and read it. And so I think that's my prediction is you're going to have to figure out new ways and you have to build on those relationships you have with media, and also convince your clients or express them, maybe you're getting in front of less people, but these are the right people and it's going to benefit you.
Yeah, I agree with you. I've said that for a long time. You got to fish where your fish are. You've got to talk to your audience. It's great, like you said, Wall Street Journal, New York Times, that's terrific.
Mm-hmm.
But if you're talking to your hyper engaged audience, that's far more valuable than being somewhere, in front of big lights.
I agree.
Well, this has been a great conversation. Let's segue now into the rapid fire question portion of our podcast, where we steal a page from inside the actor's studio, ask our guests a series of rapid fire questions meant to elicit a simple answer, maybe a laugh or two. With your indulgence, Brad, here we go. Rapid fire question number 1. What is your favorite news source?
Washington Post.
All right. Rapid fire question number 2. What is your favorite social media platform?
Oh man, I have loved TikTok during the pandemic, but I think Twitter is probably inching or just an inch ahead.
That's a good one. I have to learn TikTok. I'm just not good at it. My kids do it and I'm just not there.
Yeah, I have no desire to actually make TikToks. I just like watching them.
Yeah, they are entertaining for sure.
Mm-hmm.
Rapid fire question number 3, coffee or alcohol?
I'm gonna say alcohol.
All right. Anything particular?
No, IPA, a good IPA.
There you go. Very good. Very good. Rapid fire question number 4. What is your favorite on the run food?
Oh man. How about I don't know, like like Jimmy John's? That's
okay.
Compact. I don't know. Yep. I don't know if you have that in Long Island.
We don't have that in Long Island. No. Yeah.
Like
we have a variety of other fast food sub places, but I've seen Jimmy John's as I've traveled around the country. They're good.
Yeah.
Rapid fire question number 5. What do you want to be after you finish this career?
I'm not good enough to be a professional golfer, but that would be great to get really good and go on the senior tour. Who knows? I mean, you never know. Got
to give it a shot, right? I'm actually getting back into golf myself with my daughter. She is an anything with a ball kind of kid.
Mm-hmm.
And she can swing. She picked up a golf club and just bang, and it goes. I can't believe it. So we're going to get her a scholarship when the time is right.
I know. I mean, they're practically giving out golf scholarships, and it's a great pandemic sport.
It is, that's a good point, Brad.
Mm-hmm.
Very good point. Well, this has been a great conversation. Thanks so much for spending time with us. Please let people know how they can find you online.
I am at Brad Marley on Twitter, LinkedIn, Instagram. The URL to sign up for my newsletter is a bit it's hard to relay over podcast, but if you find me on Twitter or LinkedIn, the link to subscribe is in my bio.
I actually Googled Brad Marley newsletter and you came right up. So
there you go.
There you go. All right, cool. Well, thanks again, Brad. And thank you everyone for listening. Please remember to subscribe to the show. Connect with us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at the PR Podcast, and send us a question or a comment. Our intro is by Christopher Appold. You can find him and his fantastic photography on Instagram at Christopher_APPOLDT. Check him out there and hire him for all your photography needs. You can find me online at Jody Fisher on all the socials and on the web at jodyfisherpr.com. We'll see you next time on the PR Podcast.